The thing that I want to talk about are some of the pros and cons. And the first one, kind of the pros to adding the same use year. The first one is it's very easy. Everything falls under the same membership number. As long as you do the deed the same and everything else, it's like piling on points into the same account. At 7 months, you are 100% clean to use them together. I could have whatever I want at 7 months. They look the exact same. Between 7 and 11, they need to be the same home resort, which is what B's talking about. But it's nice because they're all there. You pull from one contract, and when that contract's maxed out, you start pulling from the other one, and it's super easy. There's no hassles with moving points around or anything like that. The big con, especially when adding resale, it can be very, very difficult to match use year. Some use years easier than others. You've got certain use years have a lot more points available that have been sold, so there's a lot more contracts that come available. But take April as the tough one, April being the smallest. You may look for contracts forever. You may never not see one. It's important to keep that in mind when you're adding on, that finding the same use here can be very, very tricky, especially if you're being specific on, I want 25 points or I want 50. And then you're trying to match use here and home resort, things get really, really difficult. So keep that in mind and understand that if you can't find the same home resort, it's not a game killer. They're always around, and we're going to talk about how you do that in a minute. Different use here. Pros. I'm going to let B go into these because B's a big alternate use here person. So I'm going to let her talk about it.
I like multiple use years. It doubles the one-time use points. What that means is every year you can buy 24 one-time points from Disney for $19 a point. If you have more than one membership, you can buy 24 points for each membership. So if you have 2 different use years, now you get to buy 48 points. You also get to wait list 2 reservations for each of your memberships.
As long as you have the points to match in that account.
Exactly. Yeah. What I like about it is when I sign onto my dashboard, there's a drop-down box. There's one membership up there. If that's not the one I want to work on, I just click on the drop-down box and it brings up the second one. I'm not signing in and out and doing different things. You can better align your banking deadlines. If you go 2 or 3 or 4 times a year, and a lot of people do, having multiple use years is great because you've got that extended time. The ease of use, if member prefers to book split stays at 11 months. This is where I like different resorts. If you have Saratoga and Copper Creek, you can bank them every other year and do a big vacation or do your vacation at 11 months at Saratoga one year and Copper Creek the next year. You can do that with the same use year or with different use years. The cons, this is Joe. Joe and I are the opposite on this.
Well, it's funny is I actually have multiple use years, and I totally, I'm a fan of it in certain ways. I think there's certain situations where it's very, very difficult for people with multiple use years. Like we were talking earlier, if you're maybe adding on 25 points, and right now you're just a tad short with what you have, and you're adding on 25 so you can combine them together to maybe go from a studio to a 1-bedroom, or maybe add a couple more nights on a trip that you would normally take. It gets a little bit trickier when you're not able to get the same use year because we have to go through the formal transfer process and moving things around. It's not a game changer.
Yeah, to do that, the day before the 11th month booking window opens, you call and transfer your points from one account to the other. And then the next morning you call at 11 months and book your room. I mean, it's not that difficult at 11 months unless you're trying to get a value resort at Animal Kingdom.
Right.
He's got on here the formal transfers between memberships, and that's because they're different membership numbers. You can't do your your point transfers online. You have to call and do those. Sometimes it's 5 minutes, and sometimes it's 5 hours.
Yeah, right now.
And your split stays. And instead of doing the split stays, I would do exactly what I just said and do the every other year thing. And there are people that love split stays. I've got a girlfriend in Chicago, and they'll come down and stay for 12 days and stay at 3 or 4 different resorts.
There are some benefits to split staying. I see some people that are the big planners, where they may heavy load their Magic Kingdom to one side of a trip, Epcot to another side of the trip, whatever it may be, and then they'll pick their resorts based on those days, and they'll intentionally split stay. And if you're one of those types, having multiple use years is not a big deal, honestly, because say you want to book 3 nights from membership A and 3 nights from membership B, you book them. Let's go 3 nights at Poly here and 3 nights at Boardwalk here, and it's already booked like that from the beginning, and it makes life real easy. Or and the other benefit to it as well, if you're at say you book it as a split stay to start with, but you want to be able to make a change later on, having them in 2 separate reservations makes your life a lot easier to keep that split stay situation versus having to modify a larger reservation down and then adding days and durations.
One of the things we don't have on here is if you've got 2 different memberships and you and your wife are on both, and you and your wife and your 3 kids are in one room, and your brother and his wife and their 3 kids are not DVC in another room, and you want to go to Top of the World, you can whip out your card.
Yeah,
And
that's
she
true.
can whip out her
Yeah.
card, and you can each take a total of 6.
Yep, that's true. That is very true. I will say this: when you call DVC, say if you decide to add on direct, DVC will always push you into the same use year you have.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of work to convince them otherwise. You better have a very valid reason to do it. Really good sweet talker. Otherwise, they're going to push you in the same use year because it saves them a lot of paperwork for one, because there's no second membership to deal with, all that stuff, and I'm sure there's some other internal things that make it a lot easier for them. Don't let a different use year scare you completely. Just obviously know that they're a little bit different and how you're going to have to manage those points going forward. And I promise you, it's not that hard. Ultimately, you'll get good at it. And I've got 3 separate use years. 3 separate memberships from my parents, 2 on mine with different use years. So it's manageable, and the more practice you get, the easier it gets.
Watch that little envelope up there. It's going to tell you when to bank, when you can borrow, when you can book.
Prior to this version of the web browser, the web option, it wasn't nearly as easy to understand all this stuff. But I mean, now you can go in and it's pretty clean cut. It's really easy to use and know where your points are and what membership numbers they are. So that's the kind of basics for buying in, new, adding on in terms of what use year is going to do to you, and how to keep that in mind. Some other things to kind of keep in consideration: if you add on the same membership number, you're always adding contracts. You can never combine the points into a new contract, but they still will work seamlessly. And that's why I thought the third bullet point there, kind of the .1, .2, .3, that's essentially all new contracts piled into the same member number.
If it's exactly the same name,
Yep.
It's going to come up on your dashboard. Everybody says, I want to add on to my deed. You're not adding on to your deed. You can't have your house and the house across the street. They're 2 different deeds.
Right. Exactly. You're creating a new deed that adds into your own account.
Right.
Yep.
It adds to your account, but it's a different property. It's a
Right.
different deed. It's a different legal description.
They do that from a legal standpoint. They also do that from a functionality standpoint, because you have usage restrictions that are applied to a contract basis. So if I buy a contract resale right now, we know that I can't use it for the Disney collection or any of those types of things. So they put that stipulation on that contract. If I bought, say, Grand Floridian, I can't use it at Riviera. So they add that stipulation to those points specific to that contract. You buy Riviera resale, it's staying at Riviera, and they apply those restrictions specifically to that contract. It's actually applied on a per contract basis, just the same.
If you found this video helpful, please click the like button and subscribe to the DVC Shop YouTube channel. We have some great educational videos coming out soon, so be sure to turn on notifications to be the first one to know when they're released. Thank you for watching, and happy traveling!